Hello, everybody. AVM Superhero here, coming to you live with another caregiver story from from a stroke survivor. This story that I have tonight is pretty interesting. It's the second one of this series that I have of a child being a stroke survivor. Actually, this child was an 8-year-old boy that actually had a AVM rupture just like I did, and I asked his mother to come on to actually talk about what actually happened with his life before and after. And she was very gracious enough to actually tell us her story. So give her a couple of minutes. Her name is Angela Schmidt. Her son is Ricky. And she'll be coming on here to tell us about what actually happened with her story, his story of him having an AVM rupture in 2018. So hopefully she'll get on pretty soon and we can get on with this live. Hey Transana, how you doing today? Doing well? Hope everything is good with you, sister. Peace and blessings. All we waiting now is for Angela and we can get started. So while she is getting herself ready, I'm gonna go through my notes until she asks me to come on to this live. Hope she gets here soon. Well, maybe I could invite her in. Let's see what's going on. She's here. Angela, how you doing tonight?
Good, how are you?
I am well. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
No doubt, no doubt. So you guys ready for Christmas and everything? Got everything ready?
Just about. I'm busy trying to make some things last minute and then trying to arrange getting all the gifts everywhere. So
Gotcha,
still
gotcha.
got stuff to do. I have to wrap Ricky's stuff still because he's been on a hunt to find his presents. And
Look at
yeah,
that.
so they've been hidden and I have to wrap them still. I'm all, if you find them, they're going back and you're not getting anything.
All right, so let's get started with our story. So basically what has happened is that Ricky in 2018 had an AVM. Did
Yes.
you know anything about this or did this just sprung up on you? Can you walk us through it?
Yeah, so from what we knew, Ricky was born a healthy baby boy, never any issues. He rarely got sick. And then in 2018, it was his dad's weekend, and I went out of town with my fiance. So we were on our way to Reno, and my mom had called me and said, Ricky came home from school complaining of a headache today, and he kind of screamed that his head hurt. It was like, oh, okay, let me talk to his dad because his dad was going to pick the kids up from my parents' house. So I let his dad know. I'm like, hey, like it's just not normal for him to complain like this. So, what can, maybe take him to the ER because his sister was sick too. She was complaining of a sore throat. So I was like, just take them both in at the same time and see what they say. So my mom gave him Tylenol. He laid down, rested. By the time his dad got there, he said he felt fine. He was just like, no, I feel fine. He was acting normal, never acted like anything was wrong. So he went to his dad's house, and I guess while they sat down to have dinner, he just started screaming hysterically that his head hurt and that he felt like he was going to throw up. And his dad, see, and I wasn't there. His dad said that he like leaned forward and just like grabbed the side of his head and was like, I feel like I'm going to throw up. And he started vomiting and lost consciousness. So his dad like lived like literally like down the road from the hospital, which is where our insurance was at. So he loaded him up in the car and like rushed him over there, like a block away. And by the time he walked into the ER with him, they called a code blue, and he was stabilized there, but they still didn't know what was wrong because what we found out was that that particular Kaiser didn't have a peds ER section. So they stabilized them, and then they were going to send us to Kaiser Fontana out here in Southern California, or Loma Linda Children's Hospital, just depending on who had a bed. So I get a call that said, or a text, because where we were at, we had bad service, and that said, get to the hospital now. And I thought like he was just letting me know he got to the ER, urgent care with the kids. And then he starts calling and calling, and I finally get it. And his dad was like, you need to get to the hospital now, Ricky. He's foaming at the mouth. He's unconscious. So my fiance and we were almost to Reno, and we start looking for flights to see if we can fly me back, to Southern California. And because of 9/11, they don't do last minute flights anymore. So we literally had to turn around and drive 8 hours back to get to the hospital. So I was only finding out what was going on. I sent my parents down to the hospital, and I was finding out what was going on through like phone call, like when we had service and stuff. And all I knew, it was bad. And we were told by the time they finally got imaging done that all they can see was he had a mass in his brain. So when they told me mass, I started thinking, oh my gosh, he has a tumor. Like, does he have cancer? Like, and cancer kind of runs in our family. So that was my initial thought. And it wasn't until later on, when they finally transferred him to Loma Linda, when they found an open place that could take him to care for him. So he was rushed by ambulance to a different hospital. And then that's where they told me that it looked like he had like a brain bleed. It wasn't a tumor. And I believe I found out the next day when I was there that it was an AVM. And I'm like, what is this? I've never heard of this before. And they told me like he was born with it. And basically it was like a ticking time bomb, just like waiting to go off. And that's when I first heard about AVM. And then my sister like jumped on the internet trying to do research for me, because I was trying to like, just take in everything they were telling me. And basically they told me right off the bat that it was so severe that his neurosurgeon had never seen anyone survive a brain bleed to his magnitude and where it was located, so we were just trying to find all the information we can. And then my sister came across the AVM, or the Aneurysm and AVM Foundation, and I reached out to them for some information. And then
the one in San Francisco?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So Dina Chan is the one that ended up responding to my sister's email right away. And then I talked to her on the phone, and she like guided me to start getting like second opinions and stuff, because I was just like, kind of mind blown that I never heard of this before, ruptured. And then now, we're told my son wasn't gonna to survive. So that's pretty much kind of where our story started. And it was just that ticking time bomb, and it decided to go off on October.
What did they do to him? Did they do an embolization, or did they do the craniotomy? What did they do?
Yeah, so when he was in the hospital, he was initially, when it ruptured, he was so unstable, and he suffered acute respiratory failure on top of the AVM because he aspirated all into his lungs when he lost consciousness and started throwing up. So he was so unstable. All they did initially is they put the EVD drain in, and they started draining all the fluid from his brain. And that's what they did initially. He was too unstable for the first like 2 weeks to even have imaging done. So we really just waited on the swelling and everything to go down. And then once they were able to get imaging, they basically were transferred back to Kaiser at this point because he was stable and they had a bed open. But what was recommended was they were going to initially do radiation, and that's what was recommended to me when we were at Loma Linda, but yet he was still unstable. So then we were transferred to Kaiser, and it was at Kaiser that I learned that on top of his AVM, he had 2 small aneurysms. with his AVM, and the neurosurgeon there recommended do an embolization on the aneurysms and then do a resection of the AVM and surgically go in. So I was kind of like, okay, this is totally different than what Loma Linda had recommended. So that's when I like started looking for those second opinions, and ultimately in the end, October, some January, about 6 months later is when they did the surgery to remove it. Yeah, so it's stayed in there healing for 6 months before it was removed. And they went in and they did the embolization, and they sealed off the aneurysms, and then he had 2 craniotomies to remove the AVM. So the first one, they didn't get it all, and when they did the MRI imaging afterwards, that's when they seen that there was a little bit left. So he went in 3 days later and removed the rest of it.
Whoa. Yeah. That's a lot. I thought I
Yeah.
had a lot. He had a lot. So did he have hydrocephalus as well?
No, we've been fortunate. There's been no fluid. He doesn't have a shunt. He was due to have imaging done in May of this year, but because of COVID, we haven't had that imaging done yet. I've been waiting because they don't deem it as being like a emergency that it has to be done. So I'm just waiting for them to contact me to let me know that they'll bring him in to do that. But the last imaging we had, there was no hydrocephalus, there was nothing in there, and everything had looked good. So
That's great.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So that's a lot to take in. So basically, you're about to go on vacation. You're about to have a good time with your fiance. Now you find out, is this your youngest son? Youngest child? This is your baby.
My
you find
baby.
out your baby have something going on with him.
Yeah.
How are you feeling at this time?
Presently, now or then? Then I was heartbroken. I just started literally screaming, my baby, not my baby. Like, he's my baby. Of course, he's a mama's boy. He's not like my daughter. She's just independent and don't need me like he does. And that was just why, my baby, like, why, like, that was my biggest thing. Why is this going on? That's all I could think of. And because we were on the road and I couldn't do anything, I felt so lost and so helpless. Like, I wasn't there. And the only thing that I could do was reach out on social media and just start asking for prayers. That was like the only thing that I felt like I could do to help at that point, because I wasn't there. And I just remember feeling so lost and like really helpless, because like I was so far away, and just that wondering, like, why is this happening? Why him? Yeah, just a whole lot of whys.
So I'm looking at Melissa just put something on there. She says my daughter had 2 craniotomies as well, 3 days apart. So I see when this happened to me in 2017, I didn't know anything about it either. And I thought it was something that would happen to someone older or around my age. I was 40, and now I'm finding out, from you and also some other people, that a lot of children have this, and it's rupturing at a very alarming rate for children at a very young age.
Yes.
So I don't really mean to bring you back there, but when this was happening, I was talking to this other caregiver, and she was blaming herself. Was you doing the same thing? And if you did, what kind of help did you get after this?
Yeah, I don't remember ever feeling like I was blaming myself for it. I felt I don't feel like I ever blame myself. I questioned my son's dad on why he didn't call 911. Initially, I'm like, if he would have called 911, then he may not have aspirated. There was like a lot of that went, but I didn't really blame him. It was just questioning, like, why didn't you take that route? Like, why did you choose this route? And I found, like, those initial questions that I had, I feel like everything happened for a reason. And like, if he would have called an ambulance, more than likely they would have taken him to the county hospital instead of our insurance provider, which was right down the street. It wasn't like, he was far away. Like, he's literally down the street from the hospital, which if that would have happened, we may have not ended up at Loma Linda, which here in California, Loma Linda is one of the top children's hospital that you can go to, so he ended up really good care. So like all those questions I initially had, and like I said, I wouldn't really blame him. I just wondered like why, like, oh, well, I would have, I felt like if it was me, I would have called 911. I would have done this or that. And I think that's just the hardest part with me, was just not being there when it happened, and feeling like, he, like, I wasn't there for him, ultimately.
So let me give you a little advice on that. Like with me, I had the same type of issues that you're talking about, and I was taken into an ambulance, and they didn't really understand that what was going on with me. So I almost fell into the highway because I was on the highway in my truck. They took me out, and luckily the guy was big enough to carry me, and he brought me into the ambulance. But at first he said, "Why don't you walk?" I'm like, "I'm trying to walk." But also when I had my embolization done, I aspirated on a table. I started throwing up, and I caught pneumonia.
Oh,
So I don't
wow.
know any way you can actually stop that from happening.
Yeah.
So what kind of advice would you give to somebody, like if somebody's going through this right now or just went through it, like how you was feeling back then? What are the things you think, well, you shouldn't do that because you're just destroying yourself? What is a good thing that you should do?
Yeah, I mean, the one advice that I would give that I felt like that I did, that I felt like, I think so often we take what the medical providers are telling us as being like the only way or the only solution. And my biggest advice would be like, if your gut's telling you otherwise, follow your gut. Like like you have those internal gut feelings for a reason. Don't just go with whatever everyone's telling you if you feel otherwise. Because in my son's case, I was sat down numerous times and told you should take him off of life support. He's not going to have a purposeful life.
So he was
And
in a coma.
yes,
Oh, wow.
yeah, and that's what everyone was telling me. Like, he's not going to have a purposeful life. If he does survive, most likely he'll be a vegetable.
Wow.
And I like questioned, like, why are you saying this? How do you know this? And it was just based off of previous research and everything, but my gut the whole time just kept telling me they're wrong, and I don't know why. I can't tell you why I felt that way, but
I'm glad to hear.
and I really went with that gut instinct, and like, for instance, when my son was in a coma, they would suction his mouth and everything to make sure like there wasn't any saliva in there, and there was nothing he can like choke on. And every time they went to suction his mouth, he would clench his fist, and I would see his fist clench. I would see his like toes curl, and I'd be like, he don't like this, And I questioned like the doctors, like, well, if he doesn't know what's going on, if he can't hear us, like, why is he clenching his fist? Why is he curling it? The only time I see him do this is when they go to suction his mouth. And they were like, oh, it's just involuntarily movements. They're not purposeful. He's not doing it like for a reason, on purpose. And I was just like, well, I totally feel the complete opposite, and they were just like, yeah, like everything was just non-purposeful movements, and it used to drive me nuts, and I would get so frustrated and like angry. I'm like, no, he's doing it for a reason. And the same thing when they told me he couldn't hear anything. Like, people would come in his room, and then if there was too much talk or chatter going on with visitors or everything, I would see his ICPs and his vitals like increase tremendously. So to me, I felt like that's a sign that he can hear us. Yeah. So like, I just question all that, and that's where I just stayed with my gut instinct. And I just think, gosh, if I wouldn't have stayed with my gut instinct, and if I would have taken him off of life support, he wouldn't be here today. And like, is he the same child as he was before his stroke? No, but has a purposeful life. He's talking, he's walking again, he's very bright and smart, and he's had to relearn everything over. But looking at him being a now 10-year-old boy, I feel like there's no reason why he can't grow up and have a job and a family, and a purposeful life. And if I would have listened to what the doctors were telling me, like, he wouldn't be here today. And I'm not saying that they don't know what they're doing. I just like really feel like if you're having a gut instinct, you know, that's telling you otherwise, get a second opinion, you know, go with that gut feeling that you
Yep.
have.
I agree with you. I agree with you because I wasn't in a coma, but you know, I was completely out of it, but
Yeah.
I didn't know I was out of it. I really didn't know that. You know, a lot of conversations was happening around me, and it might have looked like I was very lucid, but I really understood what was going on. I felt like I was fine. People would
Yeah.
keep me, and I'm like, I want some food, and I couldn't swallow.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I kind of get what you're saying, but coma part, I can't really explain that part to you.
Yeah.
Was he able to? And I know he's very young, but has he been able to tell you about his experience
He
when
don't
this was happening?
from what we can gather, he don't remember much. And matter of fact, he's now at a point because just a year ago he wasn't talking. Like a year ago today, he wasn't talking yet. He literally started uttering like simple words on Christmas Day last year. So he's at the point now in his recovery where I can actually show him videos and pictures of himself when he was in the hospital, and he has no recollection of any of it. And matter of fact, he'll look and he's like, I look so ugly. I'm like, no, you don't. Like you were just sick, but you're not ugly, you know? And, but I'll be like, do you remember this? And then he gets a little frustrated with me. He's like, I already told you, no, I don't remember, you know? I'm like, okay, but I know from the point when we came home, and there's points when we were finally home in his recovery, even though he wasn't talking yet, he'll bring up memories that he remembers like being home. So at some point he does remember things before he started talking again, but all the initial stroke and the hospital visit, stay, because he was in the hospital for 4 months, he doesn't remember really any of it from what I can tell. And I don't know if it's, you know, he's choosing not to remember it or don't want to remember it, or if it's just, you know, just not there because of the stroke.
Absolutely, absolutely. I get that. And a lot of things that you're saying, let's talk about Ricky a little bit. There's a lot of things you're saying, like, you know, you can imagine him having a great life and he's a perfectly good child, but things have changed since he had his stroke. How was he before his stroke and how is he now?
Well, just he's always been active. He's been a very active
He's
little.
very active. I've been watching him on Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah, he's always been active, so that hasn't changed. What I would say has like before, and he's always been into boogie boarding. He wanted to learn to surf. He actually got his surfboard the summer before his stroke, and has never got to use it because he had his stroke. But hiking, BMX bike, skateboards, all of it. I mean, that was Ricky. He loved it. He loved the thrill and the excitement of it. And I would say Ricky today, that hasn't changed. That's still there. If you don't watch him closely, you will catch him trying to stand on his skateboard and you're like, no. And he gets
Oh,
frustrated and upset. So I really feel for the most part, he is the same like kid before his stroke and now, as far as what he likes and the just full of life and personality. I mean, he's also the kid that's always been willing to give his shirt off his back. You know, if he had friends that wanted an ice cream and they didn't get one because their mom said no, he would hand over his to his friend and be like, it's okay, I don't need it, you know. And he's still that way today. But what's really changed with him is just more physically. You know, he physically can't like go on a skateboard. He physically can't ride a BMX bike, stuff like that. And then as far as his speech and language goes, he's having to relearn how to read. So that's been difficult for him. And he has like a speech delay now because of it. So he has a hard time. Yeah, because of the muscles and everything. So articulation's difficult for him now. So he's having to go to speech therapy, and that type of stuff is different, you know, where before he could read, you know, appropriate for his grade level. And looking at everything now academically, he's behind, but at the same time, he didn't have school for 2 years. So he's kind of right where he was academically. He's right where he left off at when he had his stroke, and now he's having to catch up for not having 2 years of education, and then on top of it relearn to read and talk.
Hello, Larry. How you doing? Well, let me ask you something, Angela, because and I don't know if you can answer this or not, but for me, when I had my AVM rupture and I had my stroke, I felt like I was three different people. Like one, I was being reborn. I was like a child, relearning to walk, relearning how to eat, so on and so on. I also knew that I was a 40-year-old man, but my body felt like I was 80 years old. Now,
Hmm.
does Ricky try to explain that to you, like he feels like he's different people, all in one body?
No, he never has. Yeah. And I could say from me being on the outside looking in, he's like literally had to relearn everything over again from like infancy to now. I mean, it was literally like having an accelerated birth to a 10-year-old, because it went from him having to relearn how to hold up his own head to having to learn how to sit up again. I mean, he literally had to learn how to do all those infant milestones over again to learn how to talk, read, and, write. And he's now learning to walk again. And he's very unsteady on his feet and he often falls. And he's so determined, though. He falls and hits the ground and he gets right back up, and he may
Yeah.
like say ow and cry, but he gets back up. And I know a lot of people look at me like, no, you can't just let him go, he's going to hurt himself. And I'm like, the only way he's going to learn is if he does it. If I hold him back, he's unhappy and he's never going to learn to get everything going again. And we've had some fortunate people that have got him a pool that we're going to get put up here shortly for him to have for therapy over the next, well, from once we get it put up, and hopefully this summer he'll be in it and able to um, be able to do therapy in it consistently, because ever since the COVID thing, he hasn't had any therapy for almost a year now, as far as PT and OT goes. And we got some great balancing tools and stuff that we had someone donate for him. So we're really hoping, the stuff that we got with Ricky's willpower will continue to help stabilize him so he doesn't fall as much and can walk as much, as normally as possible.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, first of all, you are doing absolutely correct. You gotta let him fail. That's the
Yeah.
only way he's gonna learn. And you can ask any other stroke survivor, basically they will tell you the same thing. If you don't allow me to do it, I don't want your sympathy. I just want you to be able to let me be me and try to find out on my own. So that's what he's trying to do, but he probably can't articulate it yet. But
Yeah.
if you don't let him do that, then he's always gonna be completely underneath you and want to be coddled, and you don't want that. He doesn't want that. Like you said, you want him to become a man, have a family of his own. So yeah, you're doing absolutely right. Don't listen to those actual
Yeah.
naysayers. Trust me, trust me. That's what. So let me ask you another thing about Ricky as well. You say he has a sister. He has an older sister. How old is she, and how is she with him?
She is going to be 13 in January, and then he has a almost 17-year-old sister too, from his dad. And everyone, we've been so fortunate. I mean, his sister's been through a lot. A lot has changed since he had his stroke, and she was there when he had it, so she's seen firsthand more than what I seen on what
Right.
happened that day. And I know for any child, it's a lot to take in, and she may act like it don't bother her, but I think deep down it does. She's like over here shaking her head like, no, it don't bother. It don't bother me. But I've been fortunate. She's always she treats him like nothing has happened and that he's the same kid, which is great.
Beautiful.
But at the same
Beautiful.
sense, sometimes we're like, okay, cut him a break. Like, don't say some of the stuff that you do, because like he's having to relearn everything over. So don't poke fun at him because he can't spell something, or like it's kind of that
Mm,
fine balance of great, treat him like normal, but like don't point out his shortcomings because of his stroke that we're constantly kind of battling with. But other than that, she's been real helpful, and she's always willing to help him if he needs help doing something, or help him walk, or help support him. And So she's always been a good big sister.
You're like a caregiver from God. Have you had any type of caregiving experience before this?
Yes, I have.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I actually before Ricky ended up sick and his disabilities, I worked with developmentally disabled adults for over 10 years, and then I transitioned and I had my master's and I worked with kids with autism for the last 15 years. So
Okay, so yeah,
yeah,
you've
been
been there.
around a while.
Because exactly what you just said is very important because a lot of people don't understand. Like, yeah, they look at our physical attributes and say, okay, I see that you're wrong with this, you're doing this. But once you start dealing with our mental and you start making fun of us, that is very hard for us because we go into deep depressions.
Yeah.
So I have a question about that with Ricky. How is his friends? How do they treat him? How does he deal with that?
Well, the hard part is since he's been like, I guess, I don't know what the right word for is, because there's that transition where you're in like a coma, and then even vegetative state is not the correct term anymore, and I forget the term that they use now. But he had went through all these states, and then he went to the point where he started waking up more, but then he was nonverbal. So it was really hard to gauge his interactions. And he was in the hospital for so long. So since Ricky's been where he's at now, where he's talking and able to play, it's been all COVID. So his interactions with friends have been very minimal. We do have some like close family friends that he interacts with, and like he does great. He loves them to come over and play with them. He's constantly like asking like, when can so and so come play? But again, it's the same people that we've been exposed to, that we know like their patterns and what they're doing and where they're going, because we don't want to expose him to anything. So it's been real limited. And when he was in the school environment, he was at a different level of consciousness and ability to interact. So he wasn't talking when he was actually in the classroom. I mean, he just started talking, sorry, because he started talking in December, and then we transitioned from that class in February. And then literally COVID happened and everything's been shut down since. But with Ricky, he has expressed, he loves friends, he loves the play, he looks forward to it. But at the same time, he had told my sister that he is afraid to go back to school because he's afraid people are going to make fun of him, you know.
Children, oh my gosh, yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm scared of. I get that. So, do you have a therapist for him to actually deal with those type of things?
I'm in the process of getting one set up. Again, everything's been COVID, and in California here, it's like very hard to get in-person appointments and everything. So I've been working with our insurance and working on getting behavior therapy for him and a therapist for him to talk to help with those feelings, because he's very quiet, and for the most part, he seems like a very like happy-go-lucky kid. He never questions why this happened to him. He has never asked me, why me, mom, why did this happen to me? He never complains about having to relearn everything. He literally just gets back up and keeps trying harder without asking me those questions. But there are times where he does, you can tell that he's just overwhelmed and frustrated, and he doesn't understand why all this happened to him, even though he's not like verbalizing it
Yeah, because
to
I don't know about if I can't really speak for him, but I had other people tell me this as well. It's like we don't really consider this to be a curse, but it's
yeah.
like an enlightening thing. Like you almost seen death, so now you know how precious life is,
Yeah.
and you see life differently. We're more observant. So I could, when he's saying he's quiet, I see that he's being more observant and he's watching people and you see how genuine people are. You can tell their energy. But the thing is, like, the frustrating part is basically him, and the best analogy I could come up with is basically that a person is in jail and that jail is their body. Their mind saying, hey, I could do all this, but those bars are letting them go be free. So
Yeah.
that's actually happening with them. But being mad or being mad at God because this happens to you, to me, is the best thing that ever happened to me in my life because now I see
Yeah.
life as it is. I really understand life. I appreciate life. So I see that he has that blessing as well. Because every time I see the videos of him, I don't know, you're probably a good editor. I don't know. But every time I see videos of him, he's very happy. He's having life. He's enjoying life. He's not complaining about life. He's enjoying it. So that's
Yeah.
good. So let me ask you now. Let's get to you now. All this is happening. You get him back home, and you're starting to deal with this. And you say you're a full-time caregiver, correct? So
Yes.
how's your mental state? Did you go to any therapy? Did you do anything? Depression, anxiety. How did this work out for you?
Um, haven't really had a whole lot of time since all this happened to really worry about myself. I can I can tell you I've gained a whole lot of weight since all this happened because I literally stayed by his side in the hospital the whole entire time. So you just eat what everyone brings to you. And Ricky and I, we used to love to do CrossFit together, and he would always be like, Mom, can I go back to the kids gym? And that's stuff that like him and I hopefully one day we'll get back there. But
You'll
you
get
know
back. You'll get back.
but I mean, that's what's happened to me. And that, plays a toll, like with your self-esteem and everything. The hard part is I'm so tired, and like, I haven't had time to really like worry about it or focus on it a whole lot. I'm not saying that there isn't like, I definitely feel, and I'm self-diagnosing here, but I definitely feel like I have some like post-traumatic stress because there's certain things that like can trigger, and it just sends this flood of anxiety through me, and it makes me uptight and tense. We went through a long battle of Ricky like projectile vomiting, and like, so whenever he coughs or gags, like it just like sends needles through my body because I'm like, are you going to throw up? You haven't thrown up in forever, but like, are you going to throw up? Or this whole COVID, with the pandemic, like it's very stressful on me because like we've already spent 4 months in the hospital. Like, we don't want to end up back there, and trying to keep like him and everyone in the family healthy. And, at the same time, it's so hard because he misses life, and he missed out on like, a couple years of his life that he's just like, Mom, like, when is COVID going to be over? Like, I want to be able to
What's Ricky?
yeah,
I'm waiting too.
stuff like that, like really like with him being sick and what's happened to him, it's just my anxiety, I can tell like it's really bad. And one of these days, like with him being a little bit more independent, and he doesn't have the G tube anymore, and that his care is not as intense as it was. It's a little bit, easier to have someone watch him if I need to run to the doctor or something. But again, with like COVID, it's just been one of those things that like, well, I'm not sick. Like, I don't really need to go to the doctor. I'm not going to go and expose myself to an environment that I don't know what's there. But like, I plan on going just to talk to someone just to work through, everything that's happened, and with my stress and anxiety, just dealing with it. But for the most part, like, I really try not to focus on the negative and everything we've been through. I really try to focus on the positive and the fact that like he's here today and he's doing so well. And I really just try to thank God. Like, I tell Ricky all the time, you're my miracle. Like, you are truly a miracle. Like, and he'll be like, oh, Mom, I'm like, no, really. So like, I really just try to focus on those positives instead of beating myself up over, all the negatives and everything. But I can just tell you, I'm constantly tired. Like, it's never ending. And I'm constantly worried about him. I don't think that fear and worry is going to really ever go away. It's gotten better over time, but it's still there. He even tells me, Mom, you worry about me way too much, and I'm like, are you feeling okay? Like, everything okay? And he'll be like, oh, why are you asking me? I am fine. Just leave me alone. And I'm like, okay.
Well, my mom does the same thing, so don't feel bad. I'm 44 right now, so my mom does the same thing. Greg, are you okay? You looking vitamins? Da, 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 da. Mom, I'm
Yeah,
good. Take care of
yeah, I
yourself.
did.
It's a mom thing. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. So let me ask you, since you self-diagnosed yourself with PSD, so what do you do to actually help yourself? Do you meditate? Do you pray? Do you just take time for yourself? Or like before Ricky gets up, do you have some tea and just focus on your
Um,
day?
Yeah, I pray a lot. I pray a lot throughout my day. Like it's not like where like I like sit and meditate and pray, but I'll just if I'm feeling overwhelmed and stuff, a lot of times I'll take a deep breath in and I'll say a little prayer. The hard part is with us being home. So before Ricky, when he was still in school, I was able to have some me time and be able to go to the store and do some stuff. Now that he's home, it's like literally we wake up and I have to get him logged on for school because we're doing distance learning. And then I'm in and out of his room all day helping him with school. And then it's like dinner, do what homework we need to, and go to bed. So with school being in session, it's been a little hard. But I find that every other Friday when he goes to his dad's, I usually, it's a good hour and a half drive from where we live. So that's usually like my peace and quiet time is the drive home, and I'm able to listen to a podcast or turn on some music and just not talk to anybody. And it's just kind of like that's been my relief here lately is to have that little bit of time in the car by myself.
The reason why I ask you that is because every caregiver does the same exact thing. They
Yeah.
don't think about themselves. They always think about the patient, their loved one. And you one of my nominees for my caregiver basket. That's why I do these things because I want you guys to relax. I I need you guys to survive. And
Yeah.
I say that because if something happens to you, who's going to take care of your patient? Who's going to take care of your son? So
Yeah.
you have to take care of yourself, your stress levels, your anxiety, whatever that is. You have to be able to even kill it and make sure that you're fine. Because a lot of people, and I hear it all the time, their blood pressure goes up, they have a stroke, or they even have so much stress they want to commit suicide because they don't
Yeah.
want to deal with it. So that's why I'm asking you, what do you do? What are your remedies? And those are good remedies with those drives. If you just have nobody with you and you're just by yourself and nobody knows where you are, you don't have to talk to nobody, you don't have to answer nobody. That is good. You need to decompress. I'm very proud of you. So, what are your goals? Because we're about to wrap up. So, what are your goals for you and also for Ricky? And what does that look like? How did you see that actually happen?
Um, it's so funny. I don't really like think about it a whole lot, but like my goals for Ricky is to, I guess for both of us, is just being able to continue to support him to get him, as rehabilitated as possible. One thing through this process, we've never known how much he will rehabilitate. We never know exactly where he'll be at or what type of deficits he may have long term. But my biggest goal is to build his self-confidence and his ability to keep fighting and pushing forward. He may never walk perfect again. He might always be unsteady, but my goal is to continue to work with him and be able to have the tools we can to get there. And that's where we've been so blessed. Like we have a balance board that we're able to put him in a gait trainer, and we've been working on his balance. And then we have a pool coming up, soon that is going to be tremendous for his recovery. So that's my biggest goal is what can I continue to do to help support him along the way, and I don't know where that's going to be ultimately, but we're already surpassed like what everyone told us he was going to be able to do. And, I really don't see any limits for him growing up. And for myself, my goals are just to, continue to be able to stay home and take care of him. I worry about if things should change and then I have to go back to work, being able to manage his care and me having to go back to work because it's just financially, it has to be done. Yeah.
Okay.
Not big
Now,
goals, but it's just, keep pushing him forward. That's my main goal.
and I want to tell you that it's been 3 years for me, and I'm still recovering. I know they say like after 6 months, you're not supposed to have much gains. I'm
Yeah.
still getting gains, so don't get that be a disappointment for you because you've been out of physical therapy so long. You can still get gains. The most important thing that I have learned, and a lot of people have told me, a lot of physical therapists tell me that, Greg, you know, a lot of people come in here and they give up. They can do it, but they give up. But it don't sound like Ricky's giving up. You know, he wants to do these things. He's active. His mind is telling him, "Hey, we're gonna serve soon." Okay, Ricky, serve. So these are
Yeah.
things that come out of his head, and those are things you have to promote with him. And it seems like you're doing a great job with that. So I
Thank
applaud
you.
you.
Thank you.
No, but seriously, he's really gonna get what he wants to get out of life because he wants to do it. If he wants to do it, you know, the sky's the
Yeah.
limit. I'm not saying that it's automatically going to be walking perfect, but as long as his mind is telling him that he can do it, then he will keep on continue to gain and get
Yeah.
back to what he was before.
Yeah. He's definitely
So,
very determined.
so what's the thing that you want to leave with everybody so we could close this out?
I would just say to everybody, I know this is definitely not an easy task, you know, being a caregiver or watching a young one be, you know, sick, but just never give up and always push forward and make sure you reach out to have support. You know, that's one thing I didn't mention earlier. Like if you need help, don't be afraid to say, I need help or I need a break, you know, and that's where times that my family is so supportive and I'm so grateful because if I do need a break, I will be like, hey, can I drop Ricky off? I need a break, you know, and I will drop him off with his aunt and cousins or grandma and grandpa, you know. So as a caregiver, I just really like would stress for everyone, like use all the resources you can, reach out for help. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't ever feel dumb. Like, you know, like I think anyone that is in this role as a caregiver, we're all amazing and it's a lot of work. And I don't think, you know, we're giving, and, you know, like everyone needs a good pat on their back because it's hard. It's really hard. And it's hard having our loved ones be so sick and struggling and then see them getting frustrated and everything.
Yeah, thank you for telling us that because a lot of caregivers say exactly that. But in the beginning, nobody really wants to let anybody get close to your loved one because they're so scared or they think something might happen and they think that you have to be a superwoman or superman to actually take care of that person. You
Yeah.
are correct. You have to take a break. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for
You're
bringing that up. A lot of
welcome.
people don't do that at all. And they feel embarrassed when they have to ask that question. So thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you for your story. I love you, sister. I thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Ricky's been my brother since I met him, and I really appreciate what you have done with him. And I tell Ricky he's a strong man. He's my hero. I watch him every week, and he gets me up every day. So thank you.
Thank you,
All
guys.
right, have a
Merry
great day.
Christmas. You too. God bless you.
Bye.
Bye.